2 days ago, Brian Wilson passed away. I waited a little bit to make this video, but I feel like if I'm going to post on this channel, this is something that could maybe be beneficial. I wrote some stuff down, um, but I don't think I'm going to need it. So, for anyone who doesn't know, Brian Wilson was like the brain behind the Beach Boys. I'm sure you've heard maybe Good Vibrations or Little Saint Nick, but they're more than just a pop band from the 60s to some people and to me especially. And it's very sad to see him go. He lived a very long life, and I'm happy he was around for so long, but it still does hurt to know that he's gone. So I just wanted to talk about him a little bit, about his music and what it meant to me. And, maybe it's worth a listen if you've never heard it before, specifically Pet Sounds. Um, so I had obviously heard the Beach Boys music before. I was familiar with some of their big hits, but it wasn't until I want to say the summer of 2016, um, where I used to be very into the Mew board on 4chan. For anyone who doesn't know, that's the music board. It's basically a place for the internet's most autistic to go and yell at each other about what albums are good and what albums aren't good. And I remember I was in some thread talking about phantom albums, things that were supposed to come out that never were. And I read something about this project from the 1960s that was supposed to change music if it ever came out. And that project was called Smile. If anyone doesn't know the lore behind Smile, I'll get into it a little bit later. But it was supposed to be this game changing album from the Beach Boys. It was supposed to come out a little bit before Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club. For anyone who doesn't know, the Beatles had a little bit of a rivalry with the Beach Boys. I mean, maybe this is just in Brian Wilson's head, but that was something that they were super passionate about. And because I heard this, I was like, "Oh, I've never seriously listened to the Beach Boys." So I looked around a little bit and I found out that their album Pet Sounds is one of the most critically acclaimed albums from that time period, and I knew I had to listen to it. And it just spoke to me. Man, there's a lot of reasons. I can go into a whole long description about like my point that I was in life, which the long and short of it is I didn't have anybody, I didn't have any friends, I didn't have any connection with the outside world. I would go and I would work at a fucking seafood restaurant as a dishwasher, and I'd have headphones in the whole time listening to music, and I'd get out at 1, maybe 2 in the morning if it was an especially bad night, and then I would just ride my bike up and down the beach. That's where I lived over the summer, away from all my friends. And I wasn't very good at like meeting new people, making friends, keeping in touch with friends. I didn't have like video games or anything to sort of connect me to these people in my life who were all still together. And I was just lonely and sad. And when I listened to this album, the first thing I noticed was just how masterfully made it was. It sounds perfect. There are times where I'll listen to this album today, like current year, and I'll hear new things deep in the mix that I didn't hear before. It's a masterclass in production. I'm more of a vibe guy, and so that's what originally caught me. But the more I listened to this album, and the more I actually heard the lyrics and I followed what Brian was saying, it really resonated me. It really resonated with me, rather. There were some stuff about like feeling lonely and like you don't have a place in the world. And all of this resonated with me so much that it became my favorite album. And the more I learned about Brian Wilson's story, the more I saw myself in him. And not in an egotistical way of how, like, I'm this amazing producer, but I think, and this is probably true for a lot of people, I was one of those, like, gifted kids that got special treatment and got freaking head kisses and all this garbage telling me that I'm gonna be something good, something different. I'm not like these other plebs. And Brian wasn't necessarily a gifted kid, but he was anointed after Pet Sounds as being a genius. People thought he was this musical deity that could craft amazing things. He was on par with like a John Lennon or a Paul McCartney. He was a musical genius. And a lot of people credit that label as destroying him. The expectations around being a genius are a big contributor in why we never got that album that I found out about on Mew called Smile. Brian just couldn't do it. And it came to a breaking point for him when Sgt. Pepper's finally released and he heard Strawberry Fields Forever. I could get into like the technical aspects of it, but suffice it to say, they basically beat Brian to the punch on a new groundbreaking idea. And it was devastating for him. And I think since then he had to like slowly rebuild himself. But that whole story just really stuck with me and it really made me sympathize with him. And even though he never had that groundbreaking genius success of an album, Smile, he put out amazing work, masterful work, stuff that I still listen to today, that I was not alive, that my parents weren't alive when it was made. It was different. And I'm happy that he was able to give that to me. And I don't know, it's nice to feel like something about your story is reflected in the world. And I don't know. I don't think I'm like a genius or anything. I kind of suck, honestly, when it comes to smarts, at least recently. Um, but it just meant a lot to me, you know? And I think that it meant a lot to a lot of music fans and a lot of dejected loners and people who didn't really feel like they had their place in the world, because the reason Brian could make music reflecting that emotion and that headspace is because that's how he felt. That's, at least back in the day, how he felt about his lived experience. I feel like I didn't really hammer home just how much I loved this album. I loved this album so much that on my wall, there is a poster for Pet Sounds. I don't know if you could see it very well, but that poster does not exist. I went in Photoshop and I made the poster myself because I wanted a poster for my favorite album. And I wrote my college essay about Pet Sounds, about what it meant to me, about how it made me think about life a little differently, about how it made me feel like I could be open about these feelings that I had that I don't think I was really honest with anybody, even myself, about. And it all only got to that point because of just how fucking good Brian Wilson was at production. It I only listened to the album enough times to listen to and understand the lyrics, cuz mind you, it's very hard for me to listen to lyrics. I'm really just not a lyrics guy, you know? Even if I know the words in a song, the meaning, it's a little too deep for me. Oftentimes, I need to sit down and read lyrics to actually understand what is being said, and maybe even read a genius description or two. But I didn't need that. I didn't need that to understand Sloop John B or Put Your Head on My Shoulder or any of the amazing songs on Pet Sounds. And just the way that everything sort of panned out for his career, I don't know. Maybe the music landscape would look a lot different if instead of four guys from Liverpool being the crown kings of that era, it was one guy from California and his brothers and their friends. And who knows, maybe I would have never found that album and it would have never resonated with me and I wouldn't have got into the college I got into. But, you know, really I owe it all to Brian, man. I don't know. Uh, It was such a hard time in my life when I found the album. Like, I think since then I've had worse periods where, I mean, I don't know, dude, we had a global pandemic. That shit destroyed the entire end of my high school and beginning of college. And I think maybe that was a worse time. But in terms of like normal time that's not extenuating circumstances, like most people, when they talk about summer 2016, it was this great time. We were all still kids. Everyone was having fun. Bro, I would ride my bike to the convenience store. I would steal food and then I would ride my bike up and down the boulevard for hours, listening to albums, listening to YouTube videos and podcasts, just completely by myself. Everyone that I knew in 100-mile radius was asleep. And I would come home at 5, 6 in the morning, and I would go to bed, and I would wake up for work at like 4, 5 in the afternoon. It's all I did. And Pet Sounds really helped me get through that. Brian really helped me get through that. And I think as I've grown up and went to college and what's it called? The Pareto principle, where like you move forward. It's mostly used in job situations where you move forward until you reach a point where you're no longer good at a thing. You know, you get promoted till the point of incompetence, essentially. If you're good enough at a job, you get promoted to the next job. And then if you're good at that job, you get promoted. But eventually, you're bad at a job, so you don't get promoted anymore. I think school is something similar. You're good enough at school that you can take the harder classes, and you're good enough at the harder classes that you can take the AP classes. And then you're good enough at those that you can get into a decent college. And most people, you're good at college and then you get a good job. And I fucking sucked at college. Like, horribly. Like, the school was really difficult. I gave up a lot of my life and I lost like a part of my identity in a sense where I thought I was like this smart guy. Everyone told me I was this smart, special person and I couldn't live up to it. And thinking about Brian, tons of people telling him he's a musical genius. He's made this revolutionary album. He's going to be the next big thing in art, in this somewhat subjective medium. People just knew you're different. And he couldn't do it. And that doesn't invalidate all the amazing stuff he made after Pet Sounds, but he never got to have his Sergeant Pepper's. Pet Sounds in music circles, maybe it's big, but I think like general public people aren't praising Brian and they're not praising that album in the same way that a group like the Beatles would get praised. Even though I think in terms of peak, Pet Sounds is better than any Beatles album. And I think that maybe I'm biased and maybe the album found me at the perfect time, but that doesn't change the fact that that's my feeling, that it gave me something, and I'm happy to have had it in my life. And I'm very sad to hear about his passing, and just him being in the news and stuff is making me really reflect on all of this and think about just how much he's given me. So, yeah, I think that's kind of it, guys. I mean, thank you, Brian Wilson. Rest in peace.